Yo, what's going on, people? Welcome back to another video. So I've been getting quite a few questions about how I set up my Sony a5100. So I thought in this video I will show you exactly my settings on what I use when I go out doing street photography with this camera. So without further ado, let's dive into the settings. Also, just to add, these settings are purely just for photography. I'm not going into any video settings for this camera in this particular video. If you do want that in future, let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can do something for that. So starting off in camera settings, my shoot mode is currently on manual exposure. I generally shoot between manual exposure and aperture priority. It depends on the day. So usually at night I will shoot in manual, and during the day I will shoot in aperture. But sometimes if I want more control for the type of image that I'm going to be shooting, then I'll just stick it into manual anyway. Moving on from that, my aspect ratio is 3:2. That basically uses the whole of the sensor. I don't think there's any point to be shooting in 16:9 because you're going to lose, well, basically the camera's going to crop in on that anyway. So better just to keep it on 3.2. When it comes to the quality, I used to shoot with RAW and JPEG. Then I realized I don't use the JPEGs for anything, so I only shoot in RAW on this camera now. I don't think there's ever really a case where I need to shoot JPEG on this because I always edit my photos anyway. So yeah, always in RAW. Panorama size and panorama direction, don't need to worry about, they're blacked out, so it's just one of them things. Moving on to page 2, the first couple of options are for video settings. As I said, I wasn't really going to go into video settings, but if you did want to know, my file format is XAVCS and my recording settings is currently on 60 frames. I've got this camera currently on NTSC when really I should be putting it in PAL because I'm in the UK. But because I don't really shoot a lot of video with this anyway, I've just kept it on NTSC. Now moving on to drive mode. When it comes to drive mode, this is kind of situational on how I have this. So mostly, or the majority of the time, I will have it in single shot drive. So just taking one photo at a time, repressing the shutter button. But if there's going to be any moving subjects or something that I definitely want to make sure that I get at least one shot out of it, I will put it into continuous high. I can't remember how many frames it does per second on continuous high. I think it's about, let me quickly Google it. I'll quickly Google it for you. So for continuous high, this camera will shoot 6 frames per second. So yeah, guaranteed to sort of get something if you need to with that. Flash mode, never used flash on this camera, so it's a setting that I don't worry about. Moving on to page 3. Again, this is a flash setting with the flash comp, don't worry about that. Red eye reduction, I do have this switched on. I don't really think it makes too much of a difference, but maybe it does because I haven't had to do any red eye reduction, so that would make sense. When it comes to focus area, I generally switch between wide focus area and center spot focus area. So like when it comes to doing architectural shots, I'll have it in center spot. If I know that I'm going to be capturing people and they're going to be moving about, I'll have it in wide. Wide will generally capture the person who's closest to the camera, which sometimes can be an issue. So you kind of got to judge between how you're going to play that. Ideally, I'd like to use flexible spots so I could just tap where I wanted the focus to be. But on this camera, it's quite awkward to do. So for me, it's not worth doing. I'd rather just either keep it on center or wide. AF illuminator, I have that switched off. That basically turns off the red light when you're focusing and taking a shot. Moving on to tab 4. Nothing really in there other than the ISO. ISO I will control myself manually anyway. One of the limitations on this camera is that you can't set your ISO into a set range. So ideally I'd have it set between 100 and 32,000 and then it not exceeding 32,000, which is a pain in the arse. But it's one of those things, it's an older camera, it's just something that you've got to live with. So yeah, I just set my ISO as I require it to be based on what I see. And let me add, when it comes to the ISO now as well, during the day, obviously, it's ideal to try and keep it as low as possible, depending on the situation. At night, I will generally go up to about 6400. I'm the type of shooter that I would rather try and get the shot and worry about whatever sort of noise might be in the image later. With how Lightroom is with the denoise function now, I think you could even push it a bit further than that and still walk away with a cleanish image. And then again, if it's a good image, the noise ain't really gonna deter from it too much. That's just a personal thing, in my opinion anyway. Metering mode, I have set to multi. I don't really mess about with the metering mode at all. It is what it is when it comes to that one. White balance I have set to auto, one less thing to worry about for me. There might be the occasional time where I'll switch it knowing what the day is going to be like. So if it's going to be overcast and it looks like it's not going to change all day, I might switch over to that, but at the same time, keep it on auto. It's not a problem. It does what it needs to do. Moving on to creative style. This is set to standard. I don't really mess about with the creative style. We're shooting in RAW, so it's going to be edited anyway, so there's no point in trying to put a creative style straight into the photo like that. If you're shooting in JPEG, yeah, you might want to do that, but if you're shooting in RAW, no need. Tab 6, focus magnifier. I don't use, because of the way that the camera is laid out and the touch functionality, I find it a bit awkward to do it, so I just have that left. Smile and face detection I have switched on. Obviously, being street photography, you want to try and capture people's faces in focus, so that's on. Tab 7, don't mess around with anything in there other than the color spaces left at sRGB. That's what it was always on, that's how it stayed. And tab 8, there's nothing in there to worry about, so leave that be. Moving on to custom settings. So zebras I do have switched on. I have that between 85 and 100. All that's going to do is show you where parts of your images might be overexposed, and then you can just dial so you can basically just dial everything back to try and get your exposure back. I will always try and keep my highlights. You can recover the shadows in Lightroom or whatever your editing software is, but if you blow them highlights, they're gone, you ain't saving those. So hence why I have the zebras on, just a bit of a helping hand. I have manual focus assist is on. I do have my grid line switched on, and I like to have it with the rule of thirds along with the diagonals, just to help sort of frame everything up center, or if I'm trying to put something on the rule of thirds lines, it's there, it helps. I do have peaking levels on, and that is set to high. That's more used in video for me. Peaking color, I will switch that between red and yellow depending on the situation. Sometimes I can't see the red, sometimes I can't see the yellow. And to be fair, everything else in custom settings, I don't really need to mess with. Anything else that's really in there is mostly either video related or stuff that's not really going to impact what I'm doing in the street too much. So yeah, that's pretty much my camera settings. In terms of functionality on the camera, I do have one custom button on the back, which is the question mark one, and I have that set to my focus area, so I can quickly switch between focus area if I need to. Other than that, there ain't no other buttons on the camera, which is one of the letdowns of this. It would be nice to have at least 2 or 3 custom buttons, but for a camera this size, this small, there isn't really anywhere to do that, so you work with what you've got. So that's basically it for this video. If you found this helpful, let me know, drop a comment. If you want to see anything else similar to this, or if you like this type of content, also let me know, because it helps me to decide what I'm going to put out for you. But yeah, until the next one, peace out people, thanks for watching.